as Ohio State fans?
I think anytime, right, everything starts with matchups in football. So I think when you have an offense that has a lot of guys that can create favorable matchups and win one-on-ones, right, then it's not something you can answer with a specific scheme necessarily, right? You have to respect both their wideouts outside, their wideout in the slot, their run game, and their tight ends. I think that's what makes them so good offensively, is that they have a lot of guys who can win their one-on-one matchups. And so ultimately, more than any big picture scheme piece, it's hey, how can you win your matchups when you're isolated, and you'll be able to change up the matchups throughout the game based on what you call, whether that's coverages, pressures, things of that nature. But how can you win? How can you win with your technique and fundamentals when you end up in a one-on-one? I think that's what they do so well. Is they have so many guys that can win when they're isolated. So it's a great challenge from that standpoint.
You had a lot. You had some really good guys in that group last year, and Schumann and the crew that stepped in this year. How impressive is it for them to be able to pick up that production they had last year and to be able to kind of build on it?
I think it's just a reflection of the guys that are in the room and what they expect of themselves, right? The reason that anybody comes to play at Georgia is the high expectation they have for themselves, and I think those two guys specifically and the rest of the room have an extremely high standard and expectation for themselves, and they did not place any limitations on themselves because of their experience or age. And I think that's reflected in how they've matured. They've put pressure on themselves. They've gotten better throughout the year. And when it hasn't been up to the standard, they've been hard on themselves as well. They don't necessarily need me to tell them what they did poorly, although that's obviously part of my job, and to coach them how to do it better. But that's where they've matured, is because they've remained humble despite, they're two true sophomores playing a lot of snaps, and then there's other guys in the room that are older, like Tresman and Ryan, who are in their fourth year and haven't played much either, and they've had to have an increased role. So, I think it's a reflection of their maturity more than anything else, and that's what's impressive to me is those guys' maturity to continue to remain motivated and humble despite getting a little bit of success.
Glenn, as defensive coaches, what was the takeaway with going up, really big on LSU, and then that quarterback comes in and they have a lot of success in the passing game? Was it a matter of changing some things on defense with a big lead, or what were some of the issues that cropped up?
I think when you have obviously a really disappointing half of football, right? There's never a singular issue, right? You try to address things where they showed up in their own silos, right? So if it was something that needed to be corrected in terms of call, you look at that and ways you can do that better. If it's things philosophically that you wanted to do better, you look at it from that standpoint. If it's things that can be corrected in terms of technique or fundamentals, okay, how can we create the situation in practice to make that play, whether if it's something that can be handled in terms of a technique issue. If it's something that happened because of a mental lapse, right? Okay, then where does that fall? So it's not necessarily one issue. You can look at each of the explosive plays and the reason they occurred. The first thing we do on Sunday as coaches is be really critical of ourselves on where did plays show up and why, and identify which one of those areas did it happen in, right? So was it scheme-wise? Was it execution-wise? Was it technique-wise? And try to correct them independently, and then figure out what we can do to help our guys address those issues moving forward.
You guys lost Nolan during the Florida game. How would you assess how the outside linebacker room has done without him, and what has Nolan brought to this team, staying engaged, being a leader, and helping in that aspect while he's dealing with injury?
And starting with what has he done for us? I mean, the guy he has energy every day, despite, and which is hard to do when your role's diminished because of inability to be on the field, right? And he is still. We go out to flex, and he's yelling. He's energy. He's trying to lead despite not being able to be on the field with them actively. I'm pleased with what they've done. Obviously, there's a lot of room for improvement, but in terms of what that room has been asked to do since he's been out of the lineup, I think that they've answered that challenge. Obviously, we'd like to affect the quarterback at a higher level when we get our chances to win one-on-ones and rush. But with the things that they've been tasked to do, especially on first and second down, I think they've answered that challenge, and I think they all would like to affect the quarterback at a higher level. And so they've been working on that, and look forward to seeing them get a chance to do that.
Glenn, when I say Ohio State offense, what's the first thing that jumped into your mind when I just said that? What jumps out about this offense?
I think the multitude of playmakers that they have across all position groups. It's not they obviously have star players, but it's not a group that's dominated by one specific player or position group. It's really well rounded. From the offensive front to the tight end group to the running back group to the receiver room, and obviously the quarterback's really talented. I think it's just how balanced they are in terms of skill sets and production.
And Marvin Harrison Jr., as you study him, what jumps out about him? Just what makes him different or special from your regard?
He has the ability to make contested catches at an extremely high rate. That's and it's not even necessarily. I mean, he's a large wideout, right? So people talk about catch radius and all those things. He has that, but when people are draped all over them, he's ability to win 50-50 balls at a high level, which I think that obviously there'll be times that there's free access and people are able to people are uncovered or they've schemed up some good routes for coverages. But when that doesn't, when that's not the case, he has the ability when he's isolated one-on-one to win contested throws at a high level, and that's what's special about him to me, is because that's a trait that is it's different, because there's wideouts who win because of their speed or their route running, and he has those things as well, but he really finishes at a high rate when you have him covered, and that's probably his best trait.
Why do you think these games get into scoring duels, these big-time college football playoff games? Y'all are both two pretty good defenses. Y'all may be the best defense in the country and stuff, but is it because teams just throw haymakers? How would you explain it?
I think to play high-quality defense, it goes back to the basics always, right? So what level of strain to the ball and effort to the ball are you playing with? Because ultimately that's how you eliminate big plays, right? The more people you get to the ball, football's not a game of perfect. So there's never been a game where people have played a perfect game of football, especially defensively. There's never been a game where nobody missed a tackle. So I think you start with what level of effort and strain are you getting to the ball, and you condition and train for that in practice. And then, I think beyond that, then you look at it, you say effort, tackling, execution. Game-like scenarios are different when you've gone a long time without playing in a game. The communication from the sideline to the field, the communication from player to player. So a lot of the nuances that you get into a rhythm when you're playing a full season and you're playing a game every week, and whether it's substitutions, everything, all the little details that matter, right? Those I think sometimes are lost when you have an interim, and so I think it's our job as coaches and as players and as this whole team to try to figure out our ways to mitigate the break and make sure that we don't allow that to be an issue for us.
Glenn, you guys have faced some good quarterbacks this year, obviously. What have you thought of this defense's ability to pressure quarterbacks, keep them off balance, give them different looks? Just how have you guys handled the good quarterbacks you faced?
I think that when you look at quarterbacks, right, they all are different, right, and they all have different skill sets, and they all have things that get them in rhythm, and I think you never want to allow a quarterback to get in rhythm, and the best way for that to happen is when quarterbacks are able to go to what they like to do most. That's when they start rolling, and when a quarterback gets rolling, especially a guy who's really accurate, right now he gains his confidence throughout the course of the game, right? And then it's like, I mean, in a sense, I just it triggered in my head because I saw the Pebble Beach shirt, right? But for some people, if you hit a good shot in golf, you're more likely to hit another good shot, right? Now, for some people, you may hit a good shot in golf and the rest of the day is a wash. But I think you don't want guys to get in the rhythm. So all the quarterbacks we played there have been a lot of talented quarterbacks. They all have different strengths and different things that allow them to gain their confidence throughout a game. And so I don't think that there's necessarily a blueprint for each quarterback. They can't game plan for the same quarterback the same way, right? So it's our job to get them off rhythm, and we've done that in different ways depending on the opponent. We didn't play Bo Nix the same way we played Hendon Hooker. We didn't play Spencer Rattler the same way we played Will Levis, right? And so you have to identify, okay, who's our opponent, what allows him to be confident, gain his confidence, what allows him to be successful, and then address it that way. And sometimes it's not the rush on a certain guy. Sometimes it's best to make a certain guy play quarterback.
Yep.
But for some people, you have to get them off the spot. And I don't think that you can answer that question in a confined space, because each guy's been different.
Every quarterback has different strengths, you said. What would you say are CJ Stroud's strengths from what you've seen on film?
I think he has great touch. He's extremely accurate. And I think that he does a really good job of figuring out where he needs to go with the ball and delivering the ball on time. And I think that, and then his accuracy and touch make it that if he does that, he can put the ball where it needs to be, and he has great faith in his wideouts to make plays. So he can throw the ball with confidence when he gets his one-on-ones to a spot, because he believes in all of his wideouts that they'll come down with it. And I think he has a high level of trust in the people around him, which that's key when you're a leader of an offense.
Glenn, you've been with Coach Smart here from the beginning. When he gave you this opportunity as co-DC, I mean, was that something that you'd been building up for? Did you feel ready for that, or was it kind of I'll know once I'm in that spot and how to coach it?
I think when I was a GA, I always took the approach that I wanted to prepare every day, that when I got the opportunity to expand my role, that there would never be a moment that there's obviously moments anytime that you change roles in anything in life, that there's moments where you grow and there's moments where you learn on the fly, and there's nothing like experience, right, in whatever role. But I wanted to always prepare when I was a GA, that when I got the opportunity to be on the field, that I had confidence that I'd done everything I possibly could to prepare myself for the next step. And then I feel like I've always tried, from the day I got here, I've tried to prepare myself for whatever opportunities come after that, and to not wait. You don't wait. You always preach to the players, you prepare like the starter, even when you're the backup. Now, it's easier said than done, right? But there's a huge track record of guys that maybe y'all didn't see become the players they were until they got to do it on the big stage. But you saw their habits every single day that told you this guy's going to be really successful when it's his time. And so I think anything you preach to the players, you try to emulate yourself and practice what you preach. So that's kind of how I've applied every day since I've been here. I've tried to make sure that if there was ever an additional role, whatever in my life, in my coaching career, that I was prepared for it the best I could, and didn't wait. If you wait to prepare until the storm comes, then you probably got an issue.
Ohio State has had 4 running backs who have each played major roles in games this year. What's the challenge of preparing for that when you don't necessarily know which running back is going to receive those work?
They all have their own skill sets, right? But there's an identity. I think there's an identity for a team in terms of their run game, and you can look at the skill sets of guys, and you educate the players on what each person does well, and that way they're aware when the guys are in the game. Jersey numbers matter. Know who they are, know what they like to do. But I think when you're talking about a team's run game identity, that's a little bit more philosophical. So the runs that they run, regardless of who's in the game, are very similar. And so I think from that standpoint, they're all talented. They run hard. They break tackles. They're downhill. They understand what they want to do in their run game, and they execute it at a high level. And then they've done a good job in terms of pass protection and when they've needed to be used in the pass game. So I think you just when people play a lot of backs, you just make your players aware of it. But you need to, the things that matter on running backs at the end of the day is how well you tackle and how well you fit the runs. And then when they are using the passing game, right, normally unless you're playing zone, somebody's isolated, so you got to win that matchup.
Where do you guys build your physical intensity and toughness? Is it August? Is it during each week, or where does that come from?
I think Coach Smart sets a great tone for the way things are going to be done in terms of the program, and he doesn't relax on it. I think we try to be physical on a day-to-day basis, not a week-to-week basis, right? And that way, when you have an opportunity to go play a game that you've trained for it, people say trust your training. To do that, you have to train them the right way. But it all starts with the players, because you can preach till you're blue in the face, but if they don't buy into it, if they don't practice that way, then it doesn't matter what we say. And I think it starts with the players ultimately, because they buy into the fact that this is the way to be successful. It starts with the players that have been here before that bought into it, because then when you're a young player, you learn from the older players. So there's been a lot of great leadership in the past that has bought into practicing with physicality on a day-to-day basis. And then when these guys who you see now get an opportunity to uphold that standard,
How'd you identify Jamon Dumas-Johnson? I mean, obviously you guys recruit nationally, and I mean, he seems to really be the epitome of what you're talking about right now. Do you remember when you guys identified him, recruited him, and knew that he was going to be the successor or potential successor for Coach?
Well, that was a COVID class, so there was a lot of time to watch recruiting tape in my basement that year. I feel like I probably watched every linebacker in America that year, and it was you get into a routine, because we were still having Zoom staff meetings, but then there was time mapped out in the day, and I would just mow through as much recruiting tape as possible. But then after you identify who you like, then you had a great opportunity to spend almost more time on the phone and more time on Zooms, and so you really got to know the person. And I think when I had the opportunity to get to know Jamon, I saw how much he loved ball. And so you can watch the tape and see his skill set, and you can see kind of who they are as players. But he was always about his business. He did not like all of the recruiting talk, so to speak. He just wanted substance. And I think you got to learn a lot about people in that class, because there were certain guys that just wanted to be on PlayStation Live and online and play video games against you. And there were some guys, and that's fine, because that's a part of building the relationship too. But he was very much about his business. And when we talked ball or we pulled up film on Zoom, he asked questions that were very reflective of his understanding of ball and his instincts, which I think you see when he plays the game now. But I think a lot of his evaluation beyond the film was who he was mentally and in his mind and in his heart, and it revealed a lot of the person that he is today.
Will and Kirby are real strong personalities. I've been trying to get a question for a while.
We have to swap them out.
Real strong personalities. How does that dynamic work? With working with those two guys. How you get your voice in there?
We get to all of our voices are heard. I think that's important, and it gets set from Coach Smart to listen to anybody in the building, right? Whether it's a GA, an analyst, somebody in nutrition in the training room. It doesn't matter your role. Obviously, there's a hierarchy for decision making, but I think he does a great job. You see his personality in that regard, but he does a great job of listening to everybody on the staff.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Go this way, Coach.